Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. A lot of television people tonight, and we're going to start out with Jim Fowler, who died recently at the age of 89. Jim Fowler was a sidekick to Marlin Perkins on the NBC TV show Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. And we talked about Wild Kingdom a couple of months back when we did Stan Brock, who was another sidekick of Marlin Perkins. I refer you to that podcast. Here is Omaha Television on the death of Jim Fowler.
It's apparent that this man made an impact that will last long past his life.
He was just a down-to-earth animal guy. Jim was first and foremost an animal guy.
If you knew Jim Fowler, you knew the man loved animals. But you didn't need to personally meet him to figure that out. Fowler, alongside his co-host Marlin Perkins, brought their love of wildlife to the whole world with their show, Wild Kingdom.
They were way, way ahead of their time.
The show wasn't just entertaining. Former director of Henry Dorley's Zoo, Lee Simmons, says Fowler helped educate people all around the globe about habitats and the need to protect them.
Jim and Marlin probably had as much to do with the public's appreciation of nature and of conservation, the need for conservation, as the zoos did.
And Fowler definitely had a local impact. He was the driving force behind Wildlife Encounters, a Gretna-based nonprofit that teaches kids about animals. Kip Smith says Fowler initially reached out to them over 20 years ago, but it didn't go very well.
He actually called my parents and said, hey, this is Jim Fowler. My mom thought it was a joke, and she hung up on him.
Eventually, they reconnected. And Fowler was on the organization's board of advisors until he passed away Wednesday.
His passion and what he did for animals and wanting to experience that for other people, I think he reached millions and millions of people, and hopefully that legacy will live on to teach more kids like today that we're going to talk about wildlife conservation.
Fowler's memory, for those who knew him, typically invokes a smile and a laugh. He's also known for keeping a few bugs on him on a regular basis.
Jim would like to put them in his pockets and then bring them out to surprise the kids. One day he went to a fancy dinner after the program and forgot he had a bunch of cockroaches in his pocket, and they crawled out all over him while he was having dinner.
He was certainly a character. Now, Simmons also told me that Wild Kingdom set the table for many shows that you can now find on channels like Animal Planet.
Johnny Carson would have Jim Fowler on The Tonight Show all the time, and whether it was part of the introduction or an animal he brought on the program, it was always good for a laugh.
Jim Fowler is here with a lot of strange animals. Remember, Jim Fowler was on Wild Kingdom with Marlin Perkins for a number of years? Well, you could tell Jim and Marlin Perkins apart. Jim was always the one doing the dangerous things, while Marlin would look into the camera and says, while Jim is downstream giving the vicious crocodile an enema, I'll be observing here through these high-powered binoculars. Oh, he's a zoologist, a student of animal behavior, and he designs mini wild animal parks for small communities. Would you welcome, please, Mr. Jim Fowler.
We're going to move on now to Alvin Sargent, who died recently at the age of 92. His real name was Alan Supowitz, a nice Jewish boy from Philadelphia, and he was a screenwriter extraordinaire. He won 2 Academy Awards, one for Ordinary People and one for Julia. He was also nominated for the screenplay for Paper Moon, and he worked on Spider-Man 2. As long as we're talking about Johnny Carson, here's Johnny Carson introducing Peter Houstonov, who gives the Academy Award to Alvin Sargent for Ordinary People.
Ladies and gentlemen, here is an abundantly gifted gentleman who not only understands the problems of the actor, playwright, and director, but also as an author knows the agony of facing an empty page. The impeccably literate Mr. Peter Ustinov.
Thank you. Mr. Carson is more than generous. He is accurate. I know well the agony of the blank page, and I know, too, that when words do appear at last and actors speak them, they are imprisoned on the soundtrack for all time. Phrases which have found their way into our vocabulary just as they have entered our hearts. I am pleased to reveal the winner of the Academy Award, such is the purpose of our gathering, I was led to believe, for the best screenplay based on material from another medium. The nominees are Breaker Morant, screenplay Jonathan Hardy, David Stevens, and Bruce Beresford. Coal Miner's Daughter, screenplay by Tom Rickman. The Elephant Man, screenplay Christopher DeVore, Eric Berggren, and David Lynch. Ordinary People, screenplay by Alvin Sargent. The Stuntman, screenplay by Lawrence B. Marcus, adaptation Richard Rush. And the winner is Alvin Sargent for The Ordinary People.
Thank you. I am very proud that you give me this honor and you honor this film, which is about all of us, trying to understand all of us. A movie that is about terror and despair and pain and all kinds of anxiety, violence, and yet with no bullets, no guns, and no rapes, and no homicides. I'd like to dedicate this to the actors and my producer, Ron Schwary, and the exquisite taste of my director. And there's a little house on a corner in a street in Edina, Minnesota, and there lives Judith Guest. Thank you.
For those of you who haven't seen it, Ordinary People is a 1980 movie based on the novel by Judith Guest. A lot of it was filmed right around here where we're doing this podcast in Wilmette at Walker Brothers Pancake House, in Highland Park, and in Lake Forest. Good movie. Mary Tyler Moore's best performance. Sort of playing a woman a lot like herself. Timothy Hutton and Donald Sutherland also very good. By way of introduction of our next subject, there's this. That was the theme song to the late 60s, early 70s ABC TV show The Mod Squad. And one of the stars of The Mod Squad, Peggy Lipton, died recently at the age of 72. Peggy Lipton was a nice Jewish girl from New York. She moved out to LA in the mid-60s to Topanga Canyon, became sort of a hippie, and then played sort of a hippie on The Mod Squad. It was supposed to be a new hip detective show with Clarence Williams and Michael Cole. The kicker was one was black, one was white, and one was blonde, and they could go where Joe Friday couldn't go. It's hailed today as groundbreaking, but actually I thought it was sort of ABC counterculture schlock. Sort of an updated 77 Sunset Strip for kids. Maybe worth catching just for the guest stars. A lot of good guest stars on that show. But Peggy Lipton was very attractive, and she was sort of a decent actress, as the Mod Squad's Julie Barnes. 20 years later, she went on to play a waitress in Twin Peaks, which was sort of more ABC schlock, but she was still attractive and a decent actress. She's also known for being married to Quincy Jones, and we always talk about Quincy Jones on this show. Musician, arranger, and producer extraordinaire. We talked about him a lot when we did the Leslie Gore podcast. Another nice Jewish girl from New York. Peggy Lipton and Quincy Jones got married in 1974. They were married for 16 years. The interracial marriage was sort of controversial in both the black and white communities. And there never were too many details on the divorce, but they did have two talented daughters, Kidada and Rashida. Kidada went to live with dad, and Rashida went to live with mom. Rashida's a big-time talent. She's beautiful, good actress. She was on Parks and Recreation. She also did some stuff with her mother. Peggy Lipton played her mother in Angie Tribeca. No stretch there. Rashida Jones is a high-profile star, but her mom, Peggy Lipton, was very low-profile her whole life. Well, in the late 60s, when she broke on the scene, they wanted to make her a recording star. She recorded a couple songs that didn't really make it too high on the Billboard chart, but I thought I'd play one. This is her version of Wear Your Love Like Heaven by Donovan.
Color in sky, fresh and new. Scarlet fleece changes hue. Crimson ball sings from you.
You get the idea, standard hippie chick stuff, but she was nominated for 4 Emmys and she won a Golden Globe, and I'd be remiss for Sid's sake if I didn't mention that she probably had an affair with Paul McCartney in the days before Quincy Jones. Well, we're going to close tonight with our feature, Tim Conway, who died recently at the age of 85. Great comedian. He was the ultimate second banana, and unfortunately a lot of his comedy, which is funny, does not translate well to an oral medium because he's primarily a visual comedian. But he was the second banana and funniest guy on 2 shows. One was McHale's Navy with Ernest Borgnine, whose podcast we've done, and the other was the Carol Burnette Show. Well, Tim Conway was born Tom Conway. He was a nice Croatian boy from outside Cleveland, Willoughby and Chagrin Falls. He was a tumbler in high school, which helped him do physical comedy later on. Went to Bowling Green. And then he hooked up with a guy named Ernie Anderson, and they did a bunch of shtick together in Cleveland. Ernie Anderson became a local legend later on because he became Ghoulardi, who was one of the first great horror show TV hosts. Anyway, Tim Conway's big break came when Rose Marie came to town. She was on the Dick Van Dyke Show, and they would send them all around to look for talent. And she saw Tim Conway perform. She said, "You got to get this guy to do something." So he left Cleveland, went out to Hollywood, and was part of the cast of the Steve Allen Show, funny show. Steve Allen told him to change his name from Tom Conway to Tim Conway. Tom Conway was George Sanders' brother, and he was an actor. So Tim Conway was born, and then he got the gig on McHale's Navy as Ensign Parker. Here he is on the first episode.
All right, men. I'm Ensign Parker. I'm the new executive officer here.
All right, you guys. Who flung this ensign in the water?
Well, you see, I actually sort of...
You keep flinging ensigns in the water, you'll clog up my intake valve.
All right, men. I'm warning you, I have a savage temper.
All right, okay.
Howdy, I'm Quint McHale.
You're Commander McHale?
Just call me Mac.
Mac.
It's Charles Parker reporting aboard, sir.
Boy, you sure had a doozy of a time making it. All right, sailor, what's your name?
Mr. Parker. Come here, Mr. Parker. Why don't you change into some dry dots before you explode? You're liable to start steaming if you don't.
Commander, I'm perfectly aware that you're the commanding officer here. Nevertheless, I'm also a naval officer, and I'm second in command here. And it is my duty as a naval officer to see that the men under me look and act like sailors of the United States Navy.
Oh, well, let me know how you make out, mister.
That put him in the American consciousness. He had a couple of shows where he was the star, and they all failed. But then he became part of the Carol Burnette Show, and he became one of the legendary sketch performers in television history. One of the keys was his ability to crack up his co-stars on camera, and here he is with Carol Burnett, Vicki Lawrence, and Harvey Korman in an outtake. And at the end, Vicki Lawrence cracks him up.
See, this elephant had this little dwarf trainer, and she used to put a little ballerina skirt on that elephant. He'd go around the circle, and he'd, like that. So laughable at the time. There's a rumor going around the circus that that dwarf and the elephant were lovers. The elephant squashed the dwarf. So they had to shoot the elephant. I don't know whether it's because of rumor or not, but they're buried together.
Go on, Mama. Sure that little asshole's through.
He and Harvey Korman were one of the great sketch teams of all time on television. And their most famous sketch is the dentist sketch, which doesn't translate well to this oral medium, but I urge you to see it. It's one of the great classics in the history of television, and here they discuss it.
We do the dentist sketch in our show. We end the show with it. And of course, I don't sit there and break up or fall. You know, I don't break up at all. But you don't have to. I mean, he's so wonderful, and it's they show it in dental schools. They show it to their dental students. People just love it.
And that's another sketch that actually came from a real situation. I knew a dentist who was in dental school, and it's like being in barber school. You get to get free haircuts, and you can get a free haircut if you don't mind this guy chopping you up. So you could have dental work done for them to practice. And he had the Novocaine, and they pulled the guy's cheek out. He said, "I'm going to give you a little thing." He went, and it went through the guy's cheek and into his thumb. So he went, and then he realized, Jesus. So now the guy's got a thing here, and he doesn't want to tell anybody. So that's kind of where that came.
Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps. I mentioned that Tim Conway was a great second banana, but the shows that he was on where he was the star usually failed. It's like he needed someone to play off of. The Tim Conway Show failed. He was part of the most unsuccessful show of all time, a show called Turn On, which got canceled while it was on the air. And he was also the star of Rango, a Western satire which got canceled after 17 episodes. It was supposed to be sort of an F-Troop knockoff, but as a final tribute to Tim Conway, I'm going to play the theme song from Rango, which was written by Earl Hagen, who also did the Andy Griffith theme, and sung by Frankie Lane, who did the High Noon theme, Rawhide, and the Blazing Saddles theme. It's a great theme song, far better than the show.
From out the west came the gun known best. We're gonna Rango, Rango, Rango. He wore a star, wore a Texas star. His band called Rango, Rango, Rango. From San Antonio to the Rio Grande, down Mountain Peak or desert sand, every outlaw feared that